our speaker for today.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
How many know what Feed and Focus is? Okay, a few of you. Only a few.
Perfect, gives me something to talk about.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. How about the Nature Conservancy? Okay, more people know about that. This is how we got involved with Feed and Focus is about 3 years ago. About the time when I was district governor, Bill Zender from our Noon Club approached me and said, here's an opportunity that we ought to get involved as a Rotary district. And one thing led to another, and we participated as a district in this program to help eliminate methane from dairy farms. And this is a 3-year project. We contributed money as a club. I think Joel's going to talk about that a little bit. And so the 3 years is done, the study's done, and now we have Joel and Ben from the Nature Conservancy, a couple dairy farmers, Beth and Teresa. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joel.
Yep. So, thank you so much.
I'm not sure of the order, but
Yeah, just me, I think, for you. Thank you. I'm gonna steal 2 minutes. I don't have $1. I didn't know people still carried cash, so I don't apologize. My calling. So normally I share a picture of myself when I was like 3 years old feeding a dairy calf. And the reason I do that is to let people know, especially farmers, like, hey, I have buy-in too. And the reason I do that is I share a story. Well, when I was not soon after that, so I was 3 at the time. By the time I was 4, my dad had sold all of our dairy cows. We had we milked about 80 and we had about 100 on the farm, and we had to sell those. So it was in the early 90s, and it was a period of you're either expanding or you're selling out as far as the dairies go, right? So my dad opted to sell out, and you're gonna learn that over the last decade or so, I've spent my time working in conservation and programming. So when I say programming, it's helping turn money from either, philanthropy or U.S. funding into the hands, getting that funding into the hands of the farmers. And I show that picture and tell that story because I constantly think, man, if my dad wasn't above going to someone to get help, right, and work through some of these programs that I'm going to talk about, maybe I'd still be milking cows. I don't know if that's a good thing or not on a, cold February or January morning. But anyways, thank you all for having me. Like Randy said, it was about 3 years ago. I was in, I think, the room upstairs for the afternoon meeting, presenting this project with our state director, Helen Taylor. And it's pretty unbelievable what can be done in 3 years when you look at it. And I'm gonna walk us through that story. I will add, I put some of our flyers and handouts specifically for the case study of this Rotary project on the table. That has a ton of the minutia, right? So that has a lot of the data that we've collected over the last few years in it that I may not hit on in the next 15 or so minutes. So thank you all again for having me. So again, our program is Feed and Focus. We're the Nature Conservancy, both Ben Wickerham, who's here, and myself. We're a very, very, very large organization. We have global reach. We have different staff in like 70 countries, I believe now. This slide's a little out of date. I know for sure this number of scientists that we have on the Nature Conservancy is closer to 1,000 now, I believe. That's the number I keep hearing. But we have expansive reach, and overall our mission is to conserve the lands and waters on which life depends. So this picture in the background we'll get to in a little bit, but that's a really cool picture taken very locally here. So Feed and Focus. So I want to talk just high level Feed and Focus. So overall, what the Feed and Focus program done is it was started with a partnership with Dairy Management Inc., which is the national milk checkoff. So like the Got Milk people that we all remember from our childhood with like the glue mustaches. So that's the national dairy checkoff, and a partnership with TNC and a few other corporate sponsors along the way. But the goal of the program is to get money from corporate sponsors directly into the hands of the farmers like Beth and Teresa in a local level, right? So we do that by working with the farmers, providing technical assistance, some education, and funding to get different conservation-based practices on the landscape. So that could be a number of different things, right? That could be cover crops, which we plant cover crops in the fall, usually to make sure the ground is covered throughout winter. It helps protect the soil, improves the soil health, it improves water quality, but it also it brings in a bunch of extra carbon and reduces the greenhouse gas footprint of the farm. So there's a number of different things that we can cost share and incentivize. We pride ourselves on being a very simple program. We try to eliminate all the red tape. So some of the problems and hurdles with dealing with these programs can sometimes be the headaches involved with all the hoops that these farmers have to jump through, right? So we try to make this process as truly as simple as possible. So I want to tell a little story about the program in general. So when this program was developed 4 years ago, it was started in Wisconsin and Michigan. These were our testing grounds. Wisconsin had a corporate partner right off the bat, right? So they had funding for the farmers to get some of these practices implemented. However, here in Michigan, we were running up against a wall and we couldn't find that funding. So what we decided to do was look locally rather than looking at a corporate partnership. I'm sorry, this is a little bit blurry, but what you'll see is through our partnership with, I'm gonna step aside a little bit here. What you'll see is our partnership with Rotary, thanks to Randy and Ann and everyone in this room, and honestly everyone throughout the District 6310, is we amassed a pretty nice sum of money. And the benefit of this was we had a national Rotarian from Ohio, and he was willing to match every dollar that we raised. So you could see we raised a little over $30,000, $35,000. He matched that one for one. So that gave us a grand total of $70,000. Through that $70,000, we're able to start a program here focused directly in this area. So we have 3 farms that we're going to talk about a little bit more. These are some of the practices that we've actually implemented. We, again, of that $70,000, that money is completely spent, right? So over the last 3 years, we've implemented $70,000 worth of conservation-based programming right here in Frankenmuth on these 3 farms. So, Teresa, this is one of your guys' farms of cover crops. So after, I believe you guys harvested silage and then planted some type of cover crop. I forget what that exactly was. And you guys did roughly like 70 acres that first year, if I remember right, and that's continued to grow, right? So the other benefit of having a 3-year program is we can work through technical assistance to show these farmers, like, let's start small, right? We're not asking for a lot. Start small, see if you like it. If you like it, let's continue to grow the practice. So now I believe they're well over 100 acres of cover crops. Yeah, so. The second picture in the upper right-hand corner is something Beth and her husband Drew did on their dairy farm. A practice I thought was so neat for a number of different reasons. So if you can see, there's 2 small rows of cowpeas in between that corn. So a couple of things that does is by planting that cowpea in between the corn, it has like a symbiotic relationship, right? So that cowpea will produce nitrogen.
What the heck is a
Cowpea is just essentially like a climbing legume. So it's like a pea, but it will climb. It's a vining crop. So because it vines, right, the corn is there for it to crawl up. The cowpea produces nitrogen, so the farm got to reduce some of their nitrogen input. That does a ton of things. One, it helps the bottom line, but it also reduces greenhouse gas emissions. And then it also provides a benefit of forage quality. So when they come through in the fall and those cowpeas are vined all the way up the corn plant, they have a lot of extra biomass. So you get the extra biomass, so you get an extra amount of feed, right? Which is helpful on a dairy farm, right, Beth, always. But also, because it's a pea, there's a lot of extra protein there, right? So one of the things that dairy farmers have to do is be very, very careful of their ration. So they mix all these different ingredients, but they are always balancing it, right, for a number of different feed qualities. That gave them a reduction of nitrogen, a cost-saving benefit. It gave them also a feed quality increase, right? So very, very cool practice, and I think you did that for 2 or 3 years.
That all goes into silage?
Yep, that goes right into the silage, yep. So this is the fun picture I mentioned you saw in the background. That's a picture we've come to use at TNC quite often in a lot of our presentations. So that is on James Weber's farm, the third farmer. He's not here, he's currently feeding cows right now, but that's a very, very neat practice. So that's what we call a harvestable buffer strip. So they have, and James will talk a little bit about it in a video that I want to play shortly, but that does a number of things as well. So there's not only the greenhouse gas benefits, but there's co-benefits for water quality and biodiversity as well, right? So incredible practice, and he did that on, I think, like 2.5 linear miles of county ditches around here. So very cool. Last thing is, this is not the exact one that Drew and Beth have purchased. As you can see in the mountains, that's not really their farm, but that's a hay saver or a feed saver. And so the benefit to that is when you throw a round bale out on the ground, all of that feed, essentially, it might get trampled. You might lose 15 to 20% of that bale, right? Problem with that is you're using all that intensive farming to grow that full bale, so you want to be able to use that. This is something that improves the overall feed efficiency on the farm, and again, it's by being more efficient, you're reducing that greenhouse gas output overall through efficiency. I just want to talk a little bit about where we started and where we went, right? So we started with 3 farms right here in Frankenmuth. Over the time, we've implemented about 200 acres of direct practices on the ground. We're influencing well over 1,000 acres on these 3 farms. Right from the jump, we have directly influenced about 500 acres. So when you take all the milking cows on all these farms, it's about 500 cows, right? So whether it was a feed additive, so we also cost shared feed additives, which you can feed to the cow, provides essentially like a probiotic. If, like, as humans, we take probiotics, we make sure our gut's working well. In order for the cow to be most efficient, they have to make sure their rumen is working exactly the right way too. So again, the more efficient you can be, the more or the less intensive you are as far as the greenhouse gas output. So ton of cows under programs. And again, we distributed $70,000 of your guys' funds directly to the farmers that you're gonna see and hear from. I think the coolest part of this whole thing is not only what you guys did, but what we turned that into. So I mentioned earlier that we were running up against a brick wall, and we could not find that corporate funder, right, here in Michigan. I would like to tell you that now we are telling people no. And it's to the extent that, quite frankly, we leveraged your $70,000 into almost $2 million, right, for the entire state. So after Nestle was the first one to come to the party here in Michigan, after they heard the success we're doing with these 3 small farms right here in Frankenmuth, they were pretty quick to come to the plate, right? So they didn't want to be left behind. I just think it's so great what we did, how we leveraged your money into so much more, and quite frankly, we couldn't have did it without you. So thank y'all for that. After Nestle sponsored about 15 farms across the state, General Mills came in last year and sponsored another 15 or 17 farms across the state as well. So in grand total, we have 27 farms under contract in 2024. We've implemented either cover crops or perennial hay plantings on 4,000 acres. We're influencing almost 30,000 acres with this funding. So a very, very big swath of ground that we're influencing across the state. Same thing with dairy cows. Usually the feed additives, but maybe it's nutrient management or feed management planning with the dairy cows. Again, influencing 13,000 head across the state. Last year alone, we had incentivized almost $600,000 across the state, and that was in 1 year. So that's what we built up to, and I think we're going to aim to probably do close to that again, right, Ben? Maybe a little bit more, something like that. In total, we're at almost $1 million in Michigan alone, and again, this is one state. This program touches down in Wisconsin. It starts up in Ohio this coming year, and it's in place in Idaho as well. So a pretty wide range of outcomes. I think the next slide just shows everywhere we went. So this is where we started, the 3 little yellow dots, right? And we have farms from the UP to the northern part of Indiana in partnership with Michigan Milk Producers Association. So they've been a great partner to us. Our funding partners have been great to us. And we will just continue to get as many of these practices on the landscape as humanly possible. I want to show, I'm gonna call Beth and Teresa up in just a minute, but James is not here. We have a video of James and his farm. It'll be less than 3 minutes. I wanna play that first, and then we'll invite you guys up and we can feel free to ask him questions. I wanna hear from you guys what the program has done for you, what you liked, what you didn't like, right? Some of that stuff, and we'll go from there, so.
It's always easy to keep doing things the way that you've been doing. You know, you're in your comfort zone, but innovation doesn't happen in your comfort zone. I truly, at my core, believe that you can never find the best way of doing something, that there's always something better. And I've always just had that desire to see what we can improve on and how we can do it. I'm the 4th generation in my family to work this land in Frankenmuth, Michigan. We milk 240 Jersey cows and farm 800 acres of edible beans, corn, soybeans, and other various crops. This is what's called a compost barn. It's essentially a bedded pack barn, but one that's aerated continuously. We're taking manure, we're taking any type of organic matter that we would normally just spread right out onto our fields. We can compost it in here, and then as you can see, it dries out, turns into a nice bedding source, which we'll add to our freestall barn for our other cows. Some of the things that we're trying to work with are cover cropping, feed additives to reduce enteric emissions from our cattle, recycled manure solids, solar panels, and harvestable buffer strips. Harvestable buffer is a diverse species mix along a waterway or a stream that we are then coming around and harvesting and feeding to our cattle. We encompass about 2.25 miles of linear space along our waterways, and we're able to stop nutrients from entering the surface water. We're always reevaluating the programs that we're doing on the farm and seeing if we can improve on them while searching for new ways to do things. I'm not the last person who's going to be farming this land. I'm not the only person who's impacted by the decisions that I make out here. That resonates within me and drives me to do better.
All right, so since he wasn't here, I thought that was a nice way to bring him into the part of the presentation. Again, I want to thank you all so much, but I really want to have Beth and Teresa come up, if you guys would, and just share a little bit. So I guess first and foremost, my question to you guys is, what did the program, what are a couple of benefits from the program besides, you know, just the cost share amounts that we provided?
I'll give you a little bit of background about our farm. So we're the 6th generation farmers on our farm. My in-laws actually sold the dairy farm in 2004 to be able to go to their kids' high school sports games and all of that stuff, because dairy farming is a lot. My husband and I decided in 2016 that we wanted to restart the dairy farm. If you're familiar with the dairy industry at all, 2015 to about 2021 was really, really tough from a pricing standpoint. So to get in 2016 was quite the challenge. We also positioned ourselves in a non-industry standard. We want to stay small. We milk about 60 cows. We have about 130 head total on our farm. We're very, very small compared to the rest of the industry, so that presents its own challenges. This program has really allowed us to try new practices on our farm that we wouldn't have had the opportunity or the funding to do, and really find ways to be more efficient. The cow peas that you saw, I think that was one of our biggest successes from the programs, and one of the things that we're most proud of from the program. We wouldn't have been able to try that without the funding. But we did it for 2 years, and we walked away with it. I don't know if it made a difference or not. This year we didn't do it, and I think we're gonna put the cow peas back in. So it's cool to be able to see those financial benefits and efficiencies as far as feed goes. So that's what I really appreciate, and I appreciate you guys putting trust in us to use your money appropriately.
So my name is Teresa Crook. I farm with my husband Eric Fromm. We started in 1990 from scratch, so a little bit different than Beth and Andy. So we started with 30 cows, and we have about 124 or 5 in the tank right now. So the things that we did, I gave a presentation. I had to go back and look it up on the April 5th, 2023 to the morning Rotary. I don't know how many remember that. And so at that time, I went through the Feed in Focus, and I'm just going to kind of hit the highlights because I kind of went through those 4 things. The first one was improving soil health, and what we did a CNMP, but we also, along with that line, we started planting cover crops, was what you saw. I could not get my husband until this program to do that, so thank you for allowing us to have the funding to do that, because as a agronomist for Michigan State Extension, I think it's really important that we try to keep improving our soil health. The longer we can have growing crops on that ground during the entire growing season, the better off we are. So thank you. So now I don't have to push him so hard to do it. I can actually get him to volunteer. He just has to figure out how to juggle his time to get involved. And so that part not only improves your soil health, but it actually improves your water quality too by keeping that soil in place. One of the third things they talked about was improving air quality, and you really kind of just touched on that, but we planted a variety of enogen, which has to do with the enteric gas production. It's shown, generally speaking, to bring it down, so we still plant that variety. We mix it with other things, though, for that balanced ration that they talked about. And the overall improving of the cattle health or the animal health was the 4th part of that original program. We didn't really talk about that, but we've always emphasized that as a really important thing. The happier the cows are, I call them happy cows, and the more productive they will be. And so I can say that one of the things that we've tried to do was to maintain our health of our cattle. And one of the things that shows up is the quality that he produced, the somatic cells, and actually some of the components. And so I'm happy to say that we are one of the National Silver Award winners on the National Mastitis Council for that this year. So as an ongoing program, we will keep doing that to keep our happy cows producing. We also had a tour in June of that year. I don't know how many you went on the tour that we had. Did anybody go on the tour that year? And so we did that, and I've always wanted to do that more, because I think the more we get people to come on farm, you have a better understanding, face to face. You can ask questions, you can see it. So I still encourage them to do that, and that's kind of indirectly as a response to that too. So thank you to Rotary, but as far as what I liked about the program, it really gave me the financial starting point to do cover crops. which I think to me is just a simple way of doing it, but to me it has a huge impact. And I think that allows me to do that. One of the other things that we don't really talk about, but a lot of your other financial incentives to try to do that, there is so much paperwork involved in doing that. And one of the benefits that this program has is the paperwork is pretty minimal as far as being able to work through that process. And I would commend them for thinking outside of the box too, because a lot of the other programs that are out there are so structured, they try to force you into kind of a pigeonhole. And these guys are much more flexible, and they give you more opportunity and freedom to try different things. So thank you, along with Rotary 6310, I think, if I get that right, and the 31 clubs that do that. So thank you.
Well, I'll piggyback on that flexibility. So when it started in Wisconsin, their real focus was on cover crops and no-till practices. So you don't plow fields, you just plant cover crops in the fall and you plant in the spring. For our farm, that's something we've been doing for 20 years. So when Joel presented us the project, cover crops and no-till was an option, but it had to be a new practice. So for us, that was a really big challenge because we had all of our acres already in that program. So the flexibility that Joel allowed for us to really, we sent him some crazy ideas.
100% you did.
He said, we got some no's, but if you don't push the envelope, you don't know. So the flexibility of the program really allowed us to make it our own and think beyond what Wisconsin was doing and let us push the envelope in Michigan.
Awesome, thank you.
I have a question. Do you switch out what you use for cover crops, and are those little mini sunflowers part of that, or?
We do, depending on how we want to utilize it. So depending on when we plant it, so if we plant it after our corn silage, we'll plant it to be able to feed it to our cattle. So that will have a different mix. This year we did have a field with sunflowers. That is part of the cover crop mix. Every cover crop has a different function. So depending on what was planted there before or what your soil needs, depends on what you put in your soil or your cover crop mix.
And for us, it's gonna probably maybe more for that soil water holding in place. We also plant sorghum sedan, which has got more for the feed components, but it's got a fantastic root system. So indirectly, it's gonna help build our soil health, and I just don't talk about it as far as this, because we've always done it too. But as far as like, to piggyback what Beth said, you know, I took actually a cover crop class this last fall, and I was actually fascinated because there's literature out there, but it's not seemed to be shared in certain arenas, which is unfortunate because, I mean, the one I say about the Sudan grass, I mean, they show the underground roots and they compare different species of cover crops. And so depending on what your goal is and how niche you want to put it in, like if they need nitrogen for their peas versus I just want feed, but at the same time, those roots will trap, you know, other components, primarily nitrogen, and help it grow so it doesn't go through the profile or get, you know, moved off with the water. So it's a very complex system, but it can be beneficial in numerous ways. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Maybe more for Joel, I don't know, but I saw on one of your slides you had carbon equivalent impact.
Yep.
Is that something that is just estimated, or are you measuring it? And
Yeah,
is
so
it actually economic benefit?
fantastic question. Not a super quick answer, but you'll also see on the handout some of the actual amounts are in there. I'm going off pure memory here. I think it was like 170 metric tons of CO2 equivalents per year from average from these 3 farms alone. So I think we're closer to like 5,000 across the state, which is a decent number, something we can constantly improve. You asked how do we measure it? We measure it by going through an extensive data collection on the farm. And so we're not doing MRV, which is like soil cores, actually. We're doing it through data collection on the farm, basically. So we talk to the farmers pretty in depth about what they're doing on the farm with their cows, how they're handling their manure, what they're doing in the field, how often are they tilling, what are they planting, et cetera, et cetera. So that's how we do it. Randy just gave me the 2 minutes, so we're probably down to 1 minute. So maybe if there's any other questions,
Well,
if
Joel, I wanna make sure that Ben is introduced. Ben is the Michigan Director for
Yeah.
the Nature Conservancy.
Yeah.
So Ben, do you have any comments?
No, I really don't. Joel and our farming partners covered it all. Just to reiterate Joel's points here, thank you. So this was a vision TNC had 3 years ago. At the same time, Rotary was looking for ways to kind of support environmental sustainability. It was a match made in heaven. So in Michigan, soon after, because of your trust and investment in this program, really became the epicenter for TNC's dairy work, which Joel has illustrated. The funding leveraged the other state programs that are now touching down, that we were able to cut our teeth here, and you helped make Michigan really dairyland for TNC, and it started right here in Michigan, right here in Frankenmuth, thanks to district, the local district here.
So is this program gonna continue? I mean, what's the future of this program?
Back to you, Joel.
So in Michigan, we're good for another 2 years. We re-up funding. I mentioned the General Mills funding. So even as the Nestle funding kind of goes away, we have, so the corporate money that we leverage, 100% of that goes to the farmers base. Well, 95-ish% of that goes to the farmers. And then we leverage public grants to pay for our time, our technical assistance, etc. So we're good for 2 years here in Michigan. When I say we're beating people off with a stick, I truly mean that. So I don't think this is gonna end anytime soon. I would expect this for the next 3 to 5 years minimally. We've grown in Ohio, and then Idaho, and then Wisconsin is dropping off. So a lot of growth up and to the right, I would say. Thank you all so much. I appreciate it so much.
Joel, real quick, for coming in and speaking with us today, and it's a